spawn chunks getting removed, auto end dimension loading, armadillos getting changes, and servers storing information on your computer. Hello there, Ray here. Today we'll be covering all of that and much more, all in the latest snapshot being 24W03A, 24 meaning the year 2024, as it is the very first snapshot of the year. This snapshot will eventually turn into the full release for 1.20.5 for the Java edition and the 1.21 update, probably coming in June. If you enjoyed learning about the newest things coming to Minecraft, make sure you guys are subscribed and let's get into all the new features. First up, the change to spawn chunks. So spawn chunks are an area of the game that the game will constantly keep loaded. And the spawn chunks are centered around the world spawn point. This is the point where you actually spawn into the game. You'll be placed in somewhat near this world spawn point. Then from the center outwards, there will be additional 9 chunks, which are entity processing, which I have marked in green here, which makes a total of 19 by 19 chunks. Plus there's a ring of redstone processing, meaning that entities can't get processed, but blocks like redstone can. Then there is a gray one out there, which is a chunk that doesn't load entities, but does keep track of mobs out there if they're holding up like the mob cap. But there is a problem with this massive area because, as I said earlier, it's often loaded all the time. In single player, it does unload when you go to like the nether dimension or end dimension, but if you're anywhere in the overworld, this place is also being loaded. This is great for putting in farms, but it also means that the game constantly has to be trying to figure out what type of entities are running around in this area. And all this extra work can slow down your game. So in this snapshot, they removed a bunch of spawn chunks, only leaving us a 3x3 grid of entity processing ones. So it's going to end up looking more like this. These 9 chunks that are going to be entity processing, meaning that you can run different farms like chicken farms where chickens can lay eggs. Eggs can be picked up by hoppers and then dispensed out to produce chickens, and the chickens will automatically grow up and can be killed for their feathers and meat. Other types of farms that need entity processing, things to do with like villagers, such as like my iron farm, where the red line can process things that just need block updates or redstone. This could be like moving items through hoppers into furnaces or into storage systems, where the actual item itself isn't floating around as an entity. And then beyond that, we'll have the chunk which just checks for mob cap, and then beyond that will be unloaded chunks of black line there. You can see this is considerably smaller than what it was before. And the size of this is actually the same size when it comes to loading using nether portals, a trick that was originally discovered by me and then was used and re-showcased by other YouTubers, where you can actually load the nether dimension with nether portals. I also first discovered how you can actually load the end dimension. And here on the other side, you can see we have a very similar chunk loading. And when it comes to nether portal chunk loading, they're not going to change any part of that. It's just going to be the chunks around spawn chunks. But don't worry if you are running a server, there's actually a game rule which lets you change how big you want your spawn chunk radius to be. So if you want it to be like it was before, you can just set the spawn chunk radius to 10. Otherwise, by default, it's going to be set to just 2, which is this small area. And this is measured 1 and then 2, where 10 is measured from here, and if you count outwards, 10 reaches the very edge of the entity processing. But you also have the choice to completely turn this off. Let's say you're on a server and you just don't want to deal with spawn chunks causing problems or people fussing over spawn chunks. You can set it to 0. This will completely remove them altogether. So you won't have to worry about any chunks being loaded, though you can still have people loading chunks with nether portals. You can also go beyond the previous 10 limit, as this command will let you go up to 32 chunk. In case you want to put in a lot of different automatic farms inside your spawn chunks, that is another option. Now, even with this change, it is a 98% reduction in spawn chunks. But even with just this 3x3 area, you can actually fit in a lot of different farms. And if you combine this with a server, you can have it so that the things that are here in spawn chunks are constantly being loaded, even when there's no one online. And because they're always running, you don't necessarily need the biggest and fastest farm. You just need one that will actually produce stuff. As they'll farm up a bunch of it over time, you just come in and collect what you need. Now I'll do a more in-depth video when it comes to spawn chunks, but in the meanwhile you can check out my playlist here, which is all about chunk loading and how you can use it with different farms and machines. So with spawn chunks being smaller, this will be a noticeable improvement for most people that play Minecraft. What do you think of these new changes to spawn chunks? But the positive thing is they reintroduce chunk loading for the end dimension. Like I said, this was first discovered by me a long time ago. You can check it out with this video here, and it's actually possible to do it now once again, as every time you throw an item in, it will load just as if it's like throwing an item through another portal, where it'll load the other side as entity processing for 15 seconds. You can see the chat, I have some detectors over there that are actually telling us that it is entity processing chunks. And even though the platform is between two chunks because it loads a 3x3 area, like nether portals, it's able to load both sides of the chunks plus extras around it. This is amazing, as once again we can load the end dimension without actually having to have a player here. This means a lot of my crazy farms which work around the obsidian platform here, such as like my sand generator, you can now operate it by loading the overworld with like a chunk loader, and the sand can automatically come over here and it won't just pile up here until it legs you out. And I talk about this more in my whole playlist dedicated to sand generators. And if you'd like to see me do more crazy farms and videos about this, be sure to leave a like on the video. So by sending items over into the overworld, those items will load where they end up for 15 seconds, just as the items that are going into end dimension load the area. So we can't keep the actual exit end portal loaded this way, but if you had spawn chunks that were completely turned off, you could drop items from the end dimension into the overworld, and this would actually load this area, which is an alternative to using nether portals to load it. What do you think about end chunk loading being reintroduced into the game? I'm always testing out Minecraft's latest changes to find cool tricks and glitches for you guys. You guys can even watch me do this live over at Twitch, and even join me in game on my testing server, all thanks to Bisec Hosting, who are a company that can get you your very own Minecraft server. They make it easy so you can add mods to it, play with others, and much more. And using my code RAY or the link in the description, you can get 25% off. This also helps me out, so thanks everyone who took advantage of this. Breezes got changed so that any type of projectile you shoot at the breeze will now reflect off of them in the direction of the projectile. So notice I'm shooting straight at the breeze and it's coming back at me. When before I shoot off a little bit to the side. And there was also some projectiles which could get around, and there was some projectiles which could actually hit the breeze. Also made changes to the experimental villager toggle. You only have these changes if you turn them on, but when it comes to the different types of armor, made it so you can actually trade diamond armor that has any type of durability in order to get the other pieces from the villagers. This will make it a bit easier, as you can take armor out of like a mob farm, then trade them with the villagers to essentially get any full piece of diamond armor, and also you can switch it up to get other pieces. That's one thing I hear people say, is because if they would implement these villager changes, people complain that you need diamonds, you can't get this like on Skyblock. But you can actually get diamond armor from mob loots, although it's quite rare, and it's more easy to get if you're on hard difficulty. This snapshot also brings cookie packets. This allows custom servers to request and store data on the client, which is you. Now they can only store up to 5 kilobytes worth of size of cookies, and are only stored during the configuration and playing phases. But this information will be removed when the player disconnects from the server. Transfer packets were also introduced, and this is where they can request the client, which is you, to connect to another server using a new packet. And there's also a bunch of different rules when it comes to how servers can move you over to a different server. With version 28 of the data pack, that added in a type of trigger when it comes to advancements, so they can detect stuff like default block use, which can detect stuff like the player opening a door. They also added in one called any block use, which is when the player interacts with items on blocks of any type. With it also comes some new tags, so now different gear will have these unique tags, so that only certain types of enchantments can go on them. Like feather falling would only be able to go on foot armor. They also came out with some entity tags to easily categorize different types of things, such as things that can't take poison or regeneration, which is like undead mobs, making sure that illagers are considered friends unless they are on a different team, how undead mobs get healed, things that ignore pufferfishes and won't scare them, things that can die easily to venom arthropods, things that can die more easily to the impaling enchantment, as well as things that withers won't attack. Research pack is also updated to number 24, and it allows you to have more control over when it comes to custom fonts. You can do stuff like size and shift. Next up, let's take a look at the changes to armadillos, as well as what is all going to come next in this update through using leaks. Armadillos got added to a new biome, and that is this one here. These are the Badlands. And actually, they're the only passive mob that's actually spawning here, which is pretty cool. Now the biome won't seem so dead. They also give armadillos a cool behavior. They can now actually scare spiders, and spiders will run away from armadillos as long as the armadillo isn't rolled up in a ball, in which case the spiders can ignore it. This also applies to cave spiders, so this is very similar to like cats scaring away creepers. So with some armadillos in your base, you can scare away spiders from coming close to you. I find this to be really cool, and you could also use this for like a spider farm, just like we do with cats as well, where you could scare the spiders off of the platform rather than having to wash them away. Though killing spiders isn't that useful because what they drop is mostly just string, which you can easily get from bartering or even string duplicating, but they can also drop spider eyes, which you get a lot of by using my raid farm. Now you might have noticed that the armadillos look a little bit different as they have been constantly getting feedback from people and changing the visual looks. They also did this when it came to the actual scutes as well as the wolf armor. Let's go ahead and put it on, and now we can see it's a little bit more of a pinkish color, as well as some other changes to make it look a bit more natural. What do you think of the new looks? Last snapshot video, I mistakenly said that armadillos were coming for 1.21. They're actually coming in the next 1.20 update, so we'll be getting the armadillos, the armadillo scutes, as well as the wolf armor, even though we won't get the rest of the new 1.21 stuff like the copper bulb, the crafter, and the new tough blocks and trial chambers will all come in the official 1.21 update. So you can get armadillos without even turning on the experimental features for Java, which include the update 1.21 features. We could also see a similar thing in the Bedrock previews. If we go down here to experiments, we can see that the 1.21 features are turned on and off with this toggle here, but the armadillo and wolf armor are actually completely separate. So we can expect to see armadillos in the next full release of 1.20. Now for Bedrock Edition, this will probably be version like 1.20.60 or something, but for Java Edition, we know this is going to be called Minecrarft 1.20.5. And this is actually quite different than what we've seen in the past. When it comes to the mob vote, we would vote for the mob and then we wouldn't see it into the next major update. And that's how it was for every single mob in the past, as well as every single biome vote update. And you can even see the Wikipedia here mistakenly thinks that armadillos aren't coming until 1.21, because that's just how the trend went. But it turns out we're going to get armadillos and sniffers technically both in the 1.20 update. This means we're going to see armadillos and dog armor sooner than we expected. But since they are coming out sooner than we thought, that also means that they need to fix all the bugs related to them before the full release. And they fixed a ton of bugs today. But before we look at those bug fixes, let's first take a look at an unusual milestone we're reaching with the Java updates, which makes 1.20 have one of the most full releases of any version. 1.20 being the major version and all these point versions being minor ones. Now last time we seen this was back in 1.16, which as you remember had quite a few different bugs, and that's why they came out with more minor versions. But if you've been playing a while, you know that for the 1.7 version, they actually removed the .0 version as well as the .1 version, just because they were so buggy. And it holds a record with 11 different versions. 1.8 also had a lot of problems, and you can even see this by the short times between some of these updates, like just one day between these two. And it has a total of 10 different versions. But a lot has changed since then when it comes to how they release updates, where back then they would mostly only come out with minor updates if there was some major problems in the game. But in the last couple of years, they announced that they're coming out with minor versions no matter what's going on, while at the same time even working on a future version. So seeing a lot of minor updates for version is going to be common going forward and doesn't necessarily mean that they are trying to remove some major bug in the game. So hopefully that helped explain how we are getting 1.20.5 and we're also getting 1.21 updates. Just like baby mobs will follow the adult mobs around, they added it so that baby armadillos will follow the adults more closely. You'll once again be able to use spider eyes to age up baby armadillos to get them to grow up like adults. And now it actually works when it comes to spider eyes and growing up baby armadillos into adults. And you won't have to worry about your player accidentally eating a spider eye at the same time feeding it to a baby armadillo. Babies also will be better when it comes to tempting, so they will stand closer, just as close as like the adults would stand. They also made so babies will follow the same distance from the player when being tempted with spider eyes, so they're similar as the adults. And when it comes to breeding the armadillos, before they would kind of stand pretty far away from each other, so they wouldn't actually breed in some cases, but now they'll get close enough to actually produce offspring. Now armadillos getting some fall damage would actually make them scared. You can see this one's skittish and running all about. This isn't intended, so now they'll only run around and try to avoid getting hit by something if they actually get hit by like the player. A funny bug that one of the viewers pointed out to me is that even though I'm in spectator mode, you can actually scare armadillos by sprinting. Now this wasn't intended, so it's now fixed. Now there is a rolling subtitle, you can see that on bottom right. Only problem is when they would unroll, they wouldn't play this rolling noise, so they added that as well. They also fixed the subtitles when it comes to brushing armadillos. They no longer will say armadillo brushes, as if the armadillo is doing the brushing. Now armadillos in boats can't be scared and rolled up in a little ball, but you can actually scare them ahead of time and then push them into the boat where they'll be scared at least for 3 seconds. Now this wasn't intended, so they went ahead and removed that. Now using commands, you can put yourself as the rider of an armadillo. The only problem is when armadillos see something that is being ridden nearby, they will automatically roll up in a ball and stay rolled up. Except there was a bug where sometimes the armadillo would start walking around. Notice this armadillo has a sheep riding it using a command, and despite that it's still walking, yet still in a ball. Probably has to do something with the sheep controlling the armadillo. But if you scare armadillo and then ride along with it, you can actually keep it in this rolled up mode forever, which is a rare type of mob since after this update, they no longer will stay rolled up when in a boat. They fixed the problem with the armadillo's head, which is kind of going glitchy when turning in circles with the boat. When the wolf takes damage, the armor wasn't supposed to turn red as well, so they fixed that problem, as well as you won't get duplicate sounds when the wolf armor is being applied to the wolves. With the last snapshot adding in so we can change how far the player can reach using this attribute command, we can set it so that you could reach really far and interact with the blocks, such as like breaking them or even coming in and placing blocks really far. Now even though you could set this number to a really big number, your farthest you could actually reach was 64 blocks away. But there was a problem you couldn't place in liquids far away, which they fixed in the new snapshot, and placing entities like boats also wasn't working, so those have been resolved. There was also a bug related to when it comes to how far you could reach to attack entities by switching up this attribute here. You could hit stuff that's really far away. But being able to reach far was only allowed if you also remember to turn up your interaction with blocks one, so you can increase how far you can hit stuff without actually increasing the distance you can actually break stuff. They also fixed it so that mobs can be given this really far reach, so they can actually attack you from quite a distance. While fixing this reach thing, they also fixed a older bug related to players reaching farther when it came to placing down liquids. Now notice I have this 3-block hole, and the player itself can't actually go and break the next block down while they're in survival. I'm also not able to place in any blocks down there, but if it comes to liquids and I right click, all of a sudden I'm able to place in water despite me technically not able to actually reach the surface of the block. This reach advantage was actually used in like PvP to place in lava in places where you couldn't like place in blocks to get at your opponent even though they're farther than you typically could reach. But with this change, you're going to have to keep this in mind whenever you come across this in survival, and I don't know how many people actually play PvP in the newest versions. Now with the farther reach, not only can you access different blocks, but you can also access inventories when before you couldn't. Now they also fixed some bugs when it came to the scaling one where you could scale up mobs of any type. Look how massive that sniffer is, that's just incredible. So now things that are scaled up will actually produce particles just as big as you would expect. They also added it so that scaling will work better when it comes to shulkers, as the actual hitbox of the shulker was still really small despite the shulker being massive. You can see in other scalings the hitboxes are being blown up just as big as the actual mob. But dang, that is scary. Now when they added in so you can make big mobs, this messed up when it comes to striders. Strider adults look like this. And then when you right click on adult with egg, you should get a baby. This is actually a baby. You can see it has a small hitbox, but the actual strider itself looks massive. So they went ahead and made it so they would look like babies once again. Now these big guys are cool, but man, they are really lagging down the game. Now speaking of particles, we were missing the particles when it came to bone milling rid of dirt as well as mangrove leaves. So now those particles will come back once again. Made the code a bit more efficient when it came to fuel. Every time you would add an item into the fuel slot, the game would then collect a whole database of all the different types of items in the game and how long each of them can produce fuel inside of a furnace, rather than just keeping this information on it all the time. So now it will just cache this information so it doesn't have to constantly retrieve it. They also made more room in the F3 screen so they can actually display this information correctly without jamming it all in there. When it comes to illagers, they're considered part of the same party, so they don't attack each other. But if you give a Vindicator the Johnny tag, you can see it attacks the witch, but it doesn't attack the other guy here. neither will attack the pillager. And the problem is, if you would go ahead and put the Johnny guy on a different team than the other illusioners, they should then start fighting each other, but it wasn't actually working that way, so now they fixed it. Now when entering the crafting table, if you press T on your keyboard, it will automatically select the search menu here for the crafting tables, so you can type in whatever you're looking for. This will be nice for speedrunners who don't want to manually craft items and can quickly search them over here and then just click on them. They also fix a bug related to the tick freeze command, where the compass would not take into account to when the player would rotate and go the opposite direction, it would still point forward rather than continue to point where the actual point is. They also make sure that any custom advancements which use the criteria of items being used on a block won't break in future versions. And they fix the error related to 1.20.3. Now there is still some 1.21 leaks that we haven't seen yet. One of them has to do with the Roger Badger man who came out leaking the Sniffer, Rascal, and Tough Golem mob vote, which was for Minecraft Live 2022. He also later leaked the camel, but he also leaked this image, which got taken down for being copyrighted. The image was this. This is where we seen the plant that the Sniffer would produce, being the pitcher plant. But we also seen this new type of vine, which seems like some type of plant which would slowly grow some type of blossom or spore. But despite this being shown, it never came with the 1.20 update. But seeing as we're getting more 1.20 updates, with the next one being 1.20.5, maybe this will come out. I mean, we did technically get the Sniffer and the Armadillo both in 1.20 updates. It wouldn't be a far-fetched to see that this still comes to the game. But what probably happened is instead of coming out with the vine-looking one, they just switched it up and decided to do the torch flower, as we do still have two different plants that come from the Sniffer, with the original shown pitcher plant, but then also the second plant, which just happens to be a different type of plant than they originally showed, as some of those images that they show early on are more of a concept idea and only get finalized a bit later. And maybe they even switched it up to the torch flower because of that leak, to make the leak seem less credible. After all, the image was removed by the copyright holders, so probably Mojang themselves. And it was just after that post getting taken down that he said that he was no longer going to be putting out any more Minecraft leaks. So he either got pressured by Twitter or Mojang themselves. Then comes a new leaker named Dan Gianni. Now his Twitter account eventually gets removed, either banned or he deleted himself. But before getting banned, he did release 3 different messages related to 1.21 leaks. He posted this image here, which showed the hopper pointing into the crafter with some redstone, which turned out to be correct with the auto crafter. They also leaked one, which was these 2 emotes, the sound emote and a toolbox emote, which he later confirmed that this is supposed to be a emoji of a chest in Minecraft, and it doesn't represent a music box or note blocks, which is most likely a reference to the new structure being the trial chambers and the item being the trial key. Most likely a chest which can be unlocked using it. By the way, if you don't know, I actually designed a trial key farm, so check that video out after this one. I'll put it down in the description. So unlocking the chest must produce some type of noise that's really special, as they put in the speaker making noise emote, rather than putting in the different key emotes which do exist on Twitter. And they also posted the hole in the ground. Once again, this is probably a reference to the trial chambers, which are deep underground, spawning below the normal stone layer. So we're just not too sure what these 2 different leaks were referenced to, as it doesn't completely match anything that has been out for 1.21 yet, which means that these could still be coming out in the future. And even the name Dan Gianni sounds very similar to Dungeon. Now keep in mind, when it comes to these new things which are coming to the game that the majority of people don't know about, there is some people that always do know about the stuff because they're working on it, but they are under an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, meaning that even though they know about it, they can't talk about it. So when these leaks do occur, it's probably one person knowing about it who ends up talking about it to someone else who's not supposed to know about it, and then that person maybe passes it on to another person and eventually makes it into the public eye. So Dan Gianni did eventually get his account removed, but then we've seen leaks from God's Unit, who leaked all 3 mobs from the mob vote before they were announced by Minecraft. And even though most people didn't know about the breeze until October 13th, he posted this leak for the breeze, which includes wind blowing and an explosion. This is like the breeze shooting out the breeze projectiles and they bursting upon impact. They also knew about the copper light bulbs, where they have a orange dot as well as the light bulb. And the third leak was this recycle symbol, which might have had to do with how crafters can automatically craft things up and also break things down in a way such as like turning your iron blocks back down to iron ingots. Or it could could be like a reference to the new trial spawners, which can be reused over and over again to get loot out of them. They also did change their banner to this image here at one point, re-showing the automatic crafter as well as the new trial spawners, illustrating them by using the old spawner as well as the copper and tough blocks that we see in the trial chambers, and a dispenser as if it's dispensing out loot. And all these leaks were dead on. And after the Minecraft live event, they announced that they will be doing no more leaks until maybe sometime in the future. And that's all we've seen related to leaks related to this account. Let me know what you think all the leaks are a reference to. Now join me over at my Twitch playing with the new features, or check out all the new 1.21 farms and machines that I've already designed for you, so you can be ready when the update comes out. And thanks to this month's supporters, which make these videos possible, you guys can support me a variety of ways, including my Patreon, which I'll link in the description. Otherwise, you can support me for free by leaving a like and sharing it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!